Hi there, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome. My name's Steve Clark, and today I'm very lucky to have three great CIOs and CTOs that work with Freeman Clark. We've got Warwick Hampton-Woodfall, Steve Cairns, and Joe Myrna. And we're here today to discuss knowledge on demand and how maintaining your knowledge set enables you to really keep up to date with your A game. Freeman Clark provide fractional CIOs to mid-market businesses throughout the UK and also on the East Coast of America. And we're advocates of the portfolio lifestyle and all the benefits that brings to CIOs and CTOs. We also engage with CIOs and CTOs that are still working full-time with our mentor group activities, helping CIOs and CTOs grow and develop in a safe space amongst their peers. If you'd like information about either of these things, then do feel free to get in touch for a longer chat. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. IT and a career in IT is one that is based on knowledge. And, from the day we start in IT, we have to learn a lot of things. And that knowledge changes very quickly. 3 years ago, we had to know some technology, but nowadays that knowledge is probably irrelevant. Steve, if I could come to you first, what made you realize that keeping up to date was an important part of your career in IT?
I was quite fortunate to work out in Asia Pacific and work for some large multinationals. And there was a point sort of midway through my career that I realized if I was to stay competitive, if looking for a new job or to stay relevant with current employers, I needed to stay in touch with the latest thinking. And I'm sort of a natural, curious person anyway, a sort of lifelong learner. And I found there's obviously a certain amount that you'll learn on the job from your colleagues, your peers, other people that you interact with. But you need to really sort of back that up with learning. And so I embarked upon a little bit of a journey for myself in doing a master's degree and doing some technical qualifications that I felt, made me relevant when talking to the businesses I worked for. And so that was a sort of midpoint in my career. And I sort of kept that going as I moved up through the chain of command and into the sort of CTO, CIO roles. And I've always kept that going as a sort of a discipline, if you like, to stay relevant, keep my finger on the pulse with what the latest thinking is, and make sure that I have a deeper understanding than just a sort of a glossy, high-level view that you might pick up from Googling something, for example.
Yeah, I get that. It's interesting how much we find that having curiosity is a really important skill for the CIO or CTO, actually having a think, wanting to find out more. And Warwick, why do you think once you get to that CIO, CTO level that maintaining and keeping up to date has been an important part of even at the senior level role?
I think certainly for the SME sector where we work, you have to be relevant to all sections of the business. So if you're able to speak authoritatively about the subject because you've got learning on the subject, not just, as Steve said, a sort of like a Google skim on it, it helps that credibility in the boardroom. It helps the credibility in operations boards, but it also helps the credibility when you're talking with with your team members who are usually out operationally doing the job. So I think it is really important that you at least got a few qualifications that you can rely on, because it gives you the structure to then learn new things.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. And what I've found, though, is that there does seem to be a major change as you move up the management levels, where if you're a network engineer, you're almost duty bound to get highly in-depth knowledge. And but as you go up the career ladder, there comes a point in time where you have to decide you either become a manager or you become you stay in a technical skilled role. Joe, at what point did you decide that was where you were going to go and management was the direction you were going to go, and you were happy to leave the highly technical stuff behind?
Well, prior to Freeman Clark, I was a career consultant and occasional interim. And I think we were trained from the outset to at least be able to interact with people at a very senior level. So even when we were still doing fairly deeply technical jobs, we had to be able to explain and convince senior management that what we were doing was adding value. So I think I've always had that kind of need or desire to learn fast, and learn deep fast enough, to kind of to appear to be in control of things, even when at times we kind of weren't. And I think that's what I've kind of taken through my career all the way through. Over time, then, as you know, with kind of gaining experience, and kind of gaining the ability to actually do things at a senior level, then it's much easier if you've got a knowledge of the industry, knowledge of the technologies you're trying to deploy, and can match them together, because then you're able to talk at at board level, convince people what the kind of the plan and structure is, and kind of sell in the ideas.
And I think that's an interesting point as well, because when you get to a certain stage in your career at a senior level, you end up as the translator, don't you? I mean, a lot of the job is about translation, finding out what the board or the exec want, and translating it into the terms and words that will be understood by your technical team. And you need enough technical knowledge to still be able to do that. But you've also got to have the business language to be able to talk to the board and translate what the techies are talking about into a language that is understood by the board and is more about investment and delivery and doing more with less and that kind of thing, and return on investment, return on aggravation, and so forth. Steve, how do you know what level to go down to and where to stop? Because IT is notorious for its black holes, and you can deep dive into something completely by mistake. How do you know when to stop and know you've got enough?
I think that you, at a sort of CIO, CTO level, you have to have a certain amount of understanding across the board. And for some of us, we're probably quite fortunate to have been involved in maybe application development, running operations, service management teams, and so forth. So you've got a fairly good understanding of the sort of the end-to-end view about what an IT director needs to understand. But what I tend to do is to look at what my businesses need in the future. A bit of forecasting maybe is required, and then try and gauge where I feel ill-equipped to deal with that. Okay. So if you've got some sort of a digital strategy and you know that it's going to take the company in a certain direction, and you don't feel confident that you can assist because you don't have enough detail, then you might want to start thinking about, studying up, if you like. I've done things like sensing we're going to move in the direction of machine learning or AI or blockchain. And therefore I feel, well, I don't really have a deep enough understanding right now. I need to go and start studying it now. So when I need to show that experience and that depth of knowledge, I don't feel that imposter syndrome. I feel like I actually have built up some understanding through some degree of training. And it could be, reading white papers. It could be talking to peers, or it could be going on a course and actually signing up for something and going into more detail. But you're right, there's a danger that you could spend a lot of time going to a very deep level of understanding and potentially go too deep, or not even find that it applies to the challenge you're facing. So you've just wasted your time in essence. So there is a bit of a balance in understanding what the business needs from you, and you gauging where you feel that your skill level lies, and therefore how much effort to put into skilling up. Yeah, sure. And I think that there's always a danger to some extent that because everybody is involved in IT or has an engagement with IT to a certain extent, that you'll get stuff coming in through the back door, or your CEO walks in one day and says, "What about this, Steve? What are we going to do about this?" How do you manage that kind of out of the blue bolt of lightning type sort of desire to know about a topic? I think as long as you keep your finger on the pulse, I would imagine that we probably know more than the business leaders. And I'm not saying you're an expert, but I think if you really want to stay, in touch with what's going on with tech in general, and you're reading, tech magazines, you're listening to other people talk about what's going on and what's coming up in the future, you can sort of anticipate. So, I wouldn't say I've ever been blindsided. There have been occasions where I've been asked about something and I don't feel as confident to go into great detail, but you might be able to, to talk at a high level for a period of time, but then go off and study in a little bit more depth to build up that knowledge. But I think, as IT individuals, we live and breathe this every day. And I think we get the chance to be impacted by lots of things around technology, both things that have happened in the past, so technologies that we should know about that are used today, legacy technologies even, but also what's coming up in the future. But, you can never anticipate those really difficult questions. Maybe someone has read a magazine, there's an interesting, direction that technology is going in, and they're looking to us to give the insights. I wouldn't say sometimes you have to wing it, but you just have to fall back on your general experience and knowledge.
Yeah, and I think there's also occasionally the opportunity where you can say, I don't know, but as long as it's followed up by, I'll find out and come back to you.
Absolutely.
Warwick, I know that you have taken quite a lot of time yourself to have gained some industry qualifications. You're a fellow of the British Computer Society, and you've taken qualifications around that. How has that helped you manage your knowledge, and how has that experience helped you in your jobs and knowing how to handle the knowledge and technical knowledge you require to do the job?
It scarred me for life, to be honest with you, Steve. So it was actually getting the chartered IT professional qualification, which is equivalent to sort of CEng, was actually forced upon me, and fun enough, so it is a classic professional development qualification, and I needed that. I was working for a very large engineering consultancy, and you needed to be chartered to progress within the company. So I had to embark on that if I wanted to progress. There was a lot of it's slightly more high level learning of more conceptual. So there's lots of presentations, lots of papers, and I would say, direct to your question, how has it sort of prepared me for what I'm doing now? Not that much, to be honest with you. I think that again, mentioning the SME sector, the question that your CEO is going to ask, which is, are we protected against ransomware, isn't really something that doing a presentation on vernacular IT systems is going to give me the answer to that. But what it did do is it gave me a bit of structure. I left school with just 5 GCSEs, and that was it. So I didn't go to university. I didn't have that ability to learn. Sort of didn't teach myself how to learn. So it was quite a good structure for me personally, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily helped me, apart from I do fall back on some things that I did learn there, some foundational technical knowledge, and certainly presentational skills was really, really, really helpful.
And I did a computer science degree, and I fully acknowledge that I probably use less than 2% of it, but there are aspects of the learning and what the process of learning that have helped me make sure that I'm learning the right kind of thing. And Joe, sometimes this kind of knowledge acquisition can feel like we are one page ahead of everybody else. And do you think that we as CIOs need to have a bit more in-depth knowledge than that, or is that enough for us to be able to be good enough for the boardroom and good enough for the rest of the business if we feel like we're just a few pages ahead? Tricky
one. There was a time when I was kind of seen as actually a knowledge management kind of specialist, and I was acting as a lead for that for a major consulting business, and it was really interesting seeing how different people have different ways of learning and gaining and retaining knowledge. So I don't think it's a one size fits all by any means. I think different people approach things very differently. So some people work really well with kind of self-learning, reading, researching, and gaining a very, very detailed kind of picture over a long period of time themselves. Other people, I think, learn best by engaging with others who themselves deeply knowledgeable about a subject, and personally, I'm in that sort of latter category. I work really well with with other specialists, and kind of sucking them dry of everything they kind of know as quickly as possible, and that kind of works for me. I don't think the having the kind of one-page crib sheet is good enough. I really don't. But I think at the level that we work at, we have to be able to assimilate stuff really quickly, and if that's by doing your own research or whether that's by engaging with others, whatever is your best way of doing it, works for an individual. But we have to do it quickly, and often that isn't so much about technology. It's also about how a business works, how that interface between business and technology works, as well as the kind of underlying kind of platforms. And we've got to span all of that. Where, I think that's quite a tough call, but I think that's what we have to do day and night.
And Joe, do you think there's any difference between somebody being a CIO or a CTO in a technology firm and the type of knowledge they're going to need for that versus being in an end user, non-technology company? Do you think there's a difference there, Joe? And should we be aware of that?
I think that's an interesting question, Steve, and I think there is. I haven't really thought about that before, but yeah, I've had some experience myself over the last last 18 months of working in kind of very, very different companies. Some what you'd call kind of end user type companies, but some software development businesses that are producing a kind of SaaS product. And yes, I think you do need to be more deeply development kind of technical if you're in that sort of environment, for sure. And there's a whole different set of things you need to kind of know and be able to kind of work with. Different than if you're in a company that's using technology as a platform, but really they'd almost prefer if it wasn't there, as long as it's there and works all the time. So yeah, they're very different things.
Do you think, Joe, that in that world of, if you're working in a company that has a DevOps team and a development team, that you do actually need to rely on that experience that you've got, rather than if you're introducing a new piece of technology, you've got lots of vendors out there who are able to give you tons of information about their product. You stack all those products and the supplier up against each other, and then you kind of choose one because it's what you need. But where you've got development, you've actually, you're making something. So it's an entirely different learning set. I'm a lot happier with the former rather than the latter, because my experience is it doesn't necessarily lend itself towards that dev team. But when it comes to buying the kit, it's it's very different, isn't it?
It is, and I suppose one of them is being master of a process, and one is being, to some extent, master of the technology as well. And it might be that there's also elements of what's a CIO and what's a CTO in that question as well. And I think in Freeman Clark we have some people who look, like out and out CTOs. We have some people who look like out and out CIOs, and we have some hybrids. And I'm probably a fairly comfortable hybrid. But I'm not afraid if a particular situation demands it, calling in some of the more out and out CTO type capability that we have in the group when it's needed. And then I do the same thing again. I kind of suck all the knowledge out and turn myself into the same. Yeah.
But I think that is a skill of CIO, CTO in particular. I mean, and one of the joys, actually, I think, with people working in Freeman Clark is you do move across sector and work in sectors that you may not have experience of before. Often, in the employed world, headhunters will go, well, you've always worked in telecoms, so I'm going to place you in telecoms because that's an easy win. Whereas, at Freeman Clark, we look at more like, trust, value. And it's about, is there a relationship fit? And then, we hope we've got the right people on board that can quickly spin themselves up over the weekend with a decent amount of knowledge to go in about that sector and bring their own technology experience behind it. But we've been talking about the technology side of it. I mean, another huge part of our capability and experience is on the soft side. And that, in a way, I think is a lot harder to have on demand almost, because at that point you're handling people, and people are hard things to get. You know, if you get it wrong, then there's another person involved. Steve, how have you managed to sort of keep your knowledge of the people and soft skills side of the CIO, CTO role up and alive and running well?
I think, you know, that's one of those things that is really based on our past experience. And I think by the time we get to join Freeman Clark, we've probably worked for a number of companies beforehand, maybe some large multinationals, worked in international situations, and you've learned how to maybe make mistakes in dealing with people, but you've learned how to manage people. You've learned what you like and what you don't like as an employee from your boss. And that's probably, actually, I've probably learned more from people who have managed me badly, and sort of taught myself, I am never going to do that when I am at a leadership level. And sort of, I think you still can go on your soft skills training courses that sort of give you the framework upon which to do things well. But it really comes down to, you know, building a successful career out of bringing the best out of your teams, of finding ways to, you know, encourage, support, mentor, you know, bring people together and bring the skills, you know, to bear to bring value to the companies that you've worked for. And then by the time you get to Freeman Clark, that's become a skill which is probably beyond what an SME needs. So it's something that comes naturally. So I think on the soft skills side, it really has been through trial and error, through some painful scenarios, taking people through performance improvement plans, seeing people leave your organization and then sometimes rejoin, realizing the grass isn't always greener. And you think, well, they clearly did that because they enjoyed working for me. What did I do right? What did I do in creating, you know, an environment that they like to be a part of? And I think that's something that's a real mix. I'm not sure that you can just go on a course and learn that. I think it's a mix of just being aware, being connected, understanding some of these books that are written about how to manage people well. But it's just through our careers of just building up, I guess, a kit bag full of experiences that we can bring to bear when we're working at Freeman Clark. And then we do have gaps. You've always got, you know, a bunch of people out there, you know, that we're all connected through Microsoft Teams that you can ask for favors, ask for help, and I guess fill a gap if you're feeling a little bit alone in trying to come to a decision. There are always people around that can give you advice.
Totally, absolutely. Warwick, Joe, do you have any thoughts on that as well? Come to you first. Oh, Joe.
Yeah. No, some years ago, I used to get involved in kind of senior kind of recruitment, and you know, we went through kind of times of trying to kind of train people into kind of particular roles, and by far the hardest thing to train people in is those kind of soft skills. You can if you can recruit people with those kind of skills, you can tech any of the kind of hard tech stuff, you can train it into them. But the soft skills are very, very hard to train. And I think some people either have it naturally, natively, and you can kind of develop them a bit. But if they haven't got it, then you can never get it into them.
It's interesting you say that. Well, when I was back in corporate and I ran a help desk, I recruited people who loved working on the phone because I could train the technology bit. I just knew that it was going to be really tough to train the joy of answering the phone at 5 to 4 on a Friday afternoon, knowing it could be a P1 coming in, and it changed the dynamic of the help desk because we had people who really liked talking to people and engaging with people, and the technical skills came on after that. Warwick, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you've got different people with different skills, and certainly on an IT help desk, what you're looking for is exactly that: somebody who's going to want to answer the phone and speak to people. I think if you're looking for a network engineer, or if you're looking for somebody who is a systems engineer or a programmer, I'm not really that worried about their soft skills too much. But if you're recruiting IT managers and you're recruiting, you know, senior people into your team, it's a combination of both, and it's really, really difficult to hit that exactly right. I think at the moment, there's a real struggle for recruiting people, and that salaries are going up and people's expectations for where they want to work and how they want to work are increasing and getting more broad. That I think the soft skills are equally as important now as the expectation of the employee and the person who's going to be working for you. And it's a real struggle out there at the moment. But you have to get it right, for the leadership of the firm. And there isn't a one size fits all, that's for sure. Flexibility, I think, in our approach to the responsibilities we've got for the company we're working at, I think is the most important thing. And as long as we stick to those and we try and match the people to the company, I think, we should be all right.
And Warwick, one of the things that's changed over the last 18 months, 2 years is the remote working and everybody being away from the office, sitting on their own in their study or in the kitchen or whatever. Do you think that has impacted people's ability and our ability to learn and keep up with things because your team is remote and away from you? It's much harder to hear the Devops team talking about the next release and how they're going to do it and what the shadow environment's going to look like and all that kind of stuff because they're just not there. So are you seeing that as an impact to your ability to keep up to date?
My ability, no, because well, I say no, an unqualified no, because a lot of the work that we do is sort of 2 days a week, 1 day a week into a client. So time is very precious when you're there, and you don't want to say I'm going to come into the office and I'm going to do a training course. But I think the impact on some of the businesses that I work with has been really varied. One of the companies I work with had an absolutely fantastic response to COVID in particular and remote working, and they sailed through and have done really, really well out of it. And there's a cultural change within the company that just kind of happened. In other companies I've worked with, they had to flip what they're actually doing for a living. So what their actual business had to change, and the products they were selling had to change. And the learning that people had to do was very much that just in time. I've got a new thing that I've got to do, and that was difficult for a fragmented workforce to suddenly flip into new products or services. And
one of the things that I think is a great benefit, and I think Steve mentioned this earlier on, within the Freeman Clark community, is that we have 85 odd CIOs all working within the umbrella of Freeman Clark, and we're all on teams and so forth, and we can share knowledge there. But the CIO role, when you're in corporate on a full-time job, is fairly lonely. It's much harder to get hold of peers to have a chat with them and you may well have to end up going to a supplier or whatever. In those circumstances, where do you get those knowledge and skills that is preferably unadorned by somebody's desire to sell you something? I mean, how do you go about that, Joe? How do you actually sort of find that information out when you're in a full-time job, you're lonely, you're on your own, and the suppliers want to sell you something?
I think it's partly having already, you have a network of people and suppliers you already know, and that's kind of your first kind of point of contact. I use the Freeman Clark network extensively, and I've had half a dozen other principals involved in kind of work that I've been doing from time to time, just because they've got something, they know something better than I do, and I'm not precious about bringing somebody in who knows more than I. And I think maybe there's a with experience you learn to recognize the people who actually deeply know things out there, and be able to differentiate them from the kind of salespeople who, they can talk something but they don't really know it. Pretty quickly, I think we can identify the person who really knows it, and that kind of works for us.
No, fair. I understand that entirely. Briefly, Steve, how do you go about making sure that your CEO if you're in a full-time position, knows that you still need investment as a person, as a CIO, that you're never the finished article? How do you get them to invest in you and your ongoing knowledge capabilities?
I think it's really about building a relationship of trust with the CEO of the organization, and for them understanding the journey that the company is on and how you contribute to that. It is often about building relationships as well. I mean, you're not an employee. You are supposed to be a trusted partner. If you're on the board, if you're a CIO and you're an advisor, trusted advisor to the board, you should be able to have these sort of open and frank discussions with your leaders about what you would like to do in developing your skills, areas that you feel you need to brush up on, and the investment you need. I think because technology evolves all the time, I think there is an understanding of that. I'm sure CEOs realize that tech is changing all the time, and that as IT leaders, we need to be in touch with those changes. So I think it's really about building a decent relationship, understanding where the business is going, understanding the needs that you have to support them in sort of their objectives, and being able to sort of be open and honest about where you need the development, and that it doesn't stop at a managerial level. It continues, and you are never going to stop learning. So, I'm always ready. And if I have to, within the Freeman Clark world, if I have to invest in my own learning, I would do it, because I need to feed off that new knowledge that keeps me going.
I think it's I think we need to avoid shying away from talking to CEOs about our experience and knowledge, because it's very easy for us to think that they believe that we're the finished article, and it'd be embarrassing almost to go and talk to them about needing more development, actually spending some money on the ongoing development. I really appreciate you guys coming on and having a chat about this. We're going to wrap up in a couple of minutes, but we had a couple of comments. Christopher Geyser talked about the shiny penny factor, how soon before we can stand up an AI practice type of thing. And I completely get that. Those are the left field things. And actually, I wrote an article the other day that I posted on LinkedIn that was about this. I termed it, piece of candy. And it's very easy to look at the shiny topic products and get distracted by that new technology, because we naturally like to learn new things. That's part of our curiosity as CIOs, but actually we need to get the basics right before we actually move on to more interesting things. Rob McGeechan talked about the fact that he's worked with COOs or CEOs who were actually ex-CIOs in themselves. And I would imagine that's quite a challenge as well on the knowledge front, because whatever job we go into, we never let go really of that. There's always a little bit of a geek at the heart of us that sort of continues, I think, throughout our whole career and probably further on afterwards. I think those can be real challenges. I think that will grow, because I think there's more chance now for CIOs to move into COO and CEO roles than there ever has been. And in my view, there's the CEO and the CFO were traditionally the two who kind of knew the business, because the CFO knew the whole financial environment. But I think increasingly the CIO now knows, or CTO now knows, the whole business, because IT is in every department. Departments can't last without it. And I think our knowledge now needs to spread not only in technology and the soft skills, but into marketing, into operations, into warehousing, into consultancy and all those other areas. And it's possibly going to take us out of our comfort zone, but it's going to be an amazing place to move to. And I think that opportunity to move to the most senior roles is much more likely now, post-COVID, actually, to some extent. I think COVID is partly responsible for highlighting the importance of the CIO in the business. But I think, that just-in-time knowledge, knowing where to go and get it, and then being able to use it effectively, and knowing when you actually need to get more and dig down into a little bit more is one of the most important skill sets. And I think having a group of peers around you who you know and trust, who you can go and ask a question of, is an essential part, I think, of being a CIO, and actually sort of building up that team of people that you can just pop in a question to. And there's a lot of paying it forward, isn't there? You've got to be prepared to answer questions just as much as you are to throw them out there. So, I think in summary, the knowledge on demand is definitely something that CIOs and CTOs take advantage of every day, and it's what we do. The world of IT changes at such a pace that we have to look at the knowledge on demand. We can't afford to go on a 5-day training course, and neither should we. So we need to have those the capability, particularly around technology, to be able to find those ways in which we can get that knowledge, and just the right amount of knowledge as well at the same time, and do our best to make sure that our soft skills and our leadership skills are consistently growing. I always said, if I go on a leadership course and learn one new thing, then that's been a successful course. And I think we need to keep on growing that as well to be considered a good board member. We are the teenagers on the board, aren't we? We're the Johnny come lately. 15 years ago, we definitely didn't have a position on the board, but now we should. And I think we bring that knowledge and capability into the environment, and hopefully help everybody at board level to do their best. Well, I think that's really been an interesting session. I really appreciate your time, Joe, Steve, and Warwick, to chat to me about this. I hope the people watching and listening on LinkedIn Live have found that useful as well. You're more than welcome to carry on putting comments in afterwards. And I believe if you signed up for it, you can actually view this at any point in the future as well. It will be sticky in the LinkedIn Live system within the Freeman Clark area. So, and do get in touch if you'd like to learn more about working with Freeman Clark, or you'd like to understand about our mentor groups and how we can bring you into an environment of your peers, to the benefit of you and your business and your CEO. But that's it from us tonight. Thank you very much. It's been great talking with Joe, Steve, and Warwick. Our contact details are on the screen, and you can get in contact through LinkedIn as well. So thank you very much, and good night.